To Young Black Lives Honored, be sure to hit the subscribe button, give this video a thumbs up, and leave a respectful comment below. On August 2nd, 2010, 18-year-old Latisha Frazier, a full-time employee at McDonald's, was seen leaving her job and hopping on a bus. That night, her family waited for her, but she didn't come home, and calls to her phone went straight to voicemail. They got worried and noted that this was quite unusual behavior for the mother of one. She had recently graduated from Crossland High School, and family, friends, and co-workers knew her to be a hard-working and reliable person. Latisha was also an active mother of her daughter Diamond and stayed in contact with her relatives. Her silence raised immediate cause for concern, and family members began searching. She was officially reported missing on August 4th, and they walked around familiar areas and passed out flyers to pedestrians as well as persons driving by. Simultaneously, police investigated leads as they received them, but the investigation did not seem to go anywhere. At the time of her disappearance, Latisha stood 5 feet 3 inches tall and weighed 165 pounds. She had black or dark brown hair and brown eyes. A tattoo of the word diamond on her right arm and eczema on her arms and legs were present. She was wearing her McDonald's uniform, including black pants, a brown shirt, a white tank top, and black Nike boots. Latisha had moved out of her mother's home when she turned 18 and aspired to become a chef one day. She was big on family and had actually spent the day before her disappearance with relatives at Chuck E. Cheese's. Oftentimes, Latisha could be seen spending time with her father in his ice cream truck. Witnesses reported seeing her with another guy who an investigation determined was her boyfriend. He told the police that Latisha had plans to meet some of her other friends and got off at a different stop. However, the man said that he did not hear from her later that night, as she didn't call like she usually did. When authorities initially spoke to Latisha's friends, they claimed that she never showed up. Brian Gaither allowed Latisha's mother to search his house for her daughter. During that time, he was also confronted by a neighbor, and footage was taken by media sources.
I don't really know her like that. I don't.
He's trying to convince a neighbor who confronted him that he barely knew Latisha Frazier. We shot this video as we followed the victim's family leafleting the neighborhood where she disappeared in August 2010. Gaither put his arm around Frazier's mother, offered to let her search this apartment, where he now confesses he and 5 others attacked Frazier and choked her to death. But back then, the neighbor thought the girl was a runaway and he was trying to hide her from her mother.
He let me go all through the house.
But you saying you don't know her. Come on, man. Come on, she's sitting there with y'all. She just slept in there with y'all.
She didn't sleep with me.
Approximately 5 months following Latisha's disappearance, messages including threats began popping up on her Facebook page. The anonymous social media user indicated that the 18-year-old was no longer alive but could be located at Rock Creek Park. Family and friends wondered if they were missing something or if Latisha may have been unhappy with her life and if that led to her disappearance. They couldn't fathom what would cause her to leave behind her daughter, who they said was usually attached to her hip. It simply did not make sense. Sources differ about how the authorities were eventually tipped off. Some say an anonymous call was made to law enforcement with the information, and others indicated that in January 2011, then 23-year-old Brian Gaither was arrested for an unrelated charge. It could be a combination of both. Nevertheless, the man told authorities that several others were responsible for Latisha's demise. He identified 5 others: 16-year-old Anika Nelson, 17-year-olds Lanny Bell and Johnny Sweet, 18-year-old Cynthia Proctor, and 22-year-old Lawrence Hassan. Gaither said the group, who were supposedly friends with Frazier, invited her to an apartment on the 1700 block of Trenton Place Southeast. Initially, Brian denied he was a part of the attack. However, later, he admitted to placing Frazier in a sleeper hold until she stopped moving because she was screaming and moaning. With this new information, law enforcement interviewed the others, who turned on each other immediately, and they were subsequently arrested. Lawrence Hassan told investigators that they intended on teaching Latisha a lesson because, according to them, she stole $900 from Johnny Sweet. Their stories were relatively the same, and the group alleged that it was Sweet who recruited them to carry out the horrible act. They waited in the bedroom for her arrival. Once the victim was present, Hassan allegedly led her to his bedroom, where they all joined in on assaulting her. Latisha begged them to stop, but even after the brutal attack ceased, two of the men occasionally harmed her with their feet and fists. While still alive, her wrists and ankles were taped, a pillowcase or sheet was tied around her head, and she was placed in a closet. The assailants recalled that she was whimpering as she was left there in the dark. It wasn't until the following day, when someone finally checked the closet, that her lifeless body was found. Hassan and at least one other assailant alleged that the group had planned to take apart Latisha's body in a bathtub, put her in a container, and dispose of her in a park, but he demanded that her remains be removed from his home. They could not bear the scent. As a result, they claimed to have thrown away her remains in a dumpster behind the residence. When investigators tried to follow up, it was determined that the dumpster was collected by Waste Management and its contents were left in a Virginia landfill. If they are telling the truth, authorities believe that is where Latisha lies until this day. An inference was made that she was at least 60 to 70 feet below the surface at the time. Prosecutors intended to try each defendant individually for their roles in the senseless crime. Cynthia Proctor pled guilty in July 2011, and Lawrence Hassan pled guilty in October 2011. On May 17, 2013, Proctor was sentenced to 21 years in prison on charges of second-degree fatal abuse, kidnapping, and conspiracy to commit evidence tampering. Hassan was sentenced to 18 years in prison for second-degree fatal abuse and kidnapping. Upon completion of their prison terms, they will be placed on 5 years of supervised release. The others accused also pleaded guilty to their respective charges, with exception of Johnny Sweet. Brian Gaither had actually pleaded guilty on the eve of his trial and subsequently tried to withdraw his plea, telling the court that his attorneys did not tell him in detail what the plea meant, and when he entered the plea, he was tired, emotionally and mentally. On April 9, 2013, Gaither was sentenced to 32 years in prison, followed by 5 years of probation on the first-degree fatal abuse charge. At Sweet's trial, McCullough testified that he helped Brian Gaither drag a gray bin containing a black plastic bag covered by a blanket to a dumpster in the 1700 block of Trenton Place Southeast. The bin weighed about 150 pounds, he said. He told the court that he never looked in the black bag. Prosecutors Chris Kavanaugh and Melinda Williams argued that Sweet persuaded all 6 of his friends, 3 teenage girls and 3 men, to beat Frazier. Also, they said there was no evidence that Frazier stole the money or even knew about the money. Prosecutors had offered 2 plea deals to Johnny, in which they agreed to request a sentence of no less than 30 years and no more than 40, However, Sweet rejected both offers. Lenny Bell testified that around 3 p.m. on that fateful day, Johnny knocked on her front door and told her to come over to his house as everyone was chilling and listening to music. Bell said that she waited about 15 minutes before going over, and when she got there, the other co-defendants were all waiting. According to Bell, after a few minutes in the back bedroom, Johnny told her that he wanted her to beat up a girl who had stolen a, quote, stack of money from him. Lenny testified that she didn't take Sweet's request seriously at first, and he never told her the name of the alleged thief. A few minutes later, Johnny went to the front door before returning to the bedroom with his arm around Frazier's neck in a friendly manner. She was still dressed in her McDonald's uniform and sat in a chair. Lenny said Sweet closed the bedroom door and said, quote, "Ain't nobody about to leave." Anika Nelson then threw the first punch, which surprised Frazier, who immediately asked what was going on, though no one answered. Bell said Nelson kept punching, then Proctor joined in. Frazier stood in the corner covering her face with her arms, and then Sweet urged Bell to join in. She claimed that she wasn't aware of what would happen beforehand and claimed it was peer pressure that led to the ordeal. Bell said that after a few minutes of continuous assault, she pushed the other two women away and told them to stop because Latisha had done nothing to them and she was not defending herself. Bell testified that Johnny responded by hitting Frazier too many times to count. A few minutes later, Brian said it was his turn and began assaulting her with his feet. Following this, Bell said that Johnny then went to the bathroom and retrieved a set of brass knuckles with an extended knife and shouted expletives. Lenny decided to leave, and as she did so, she claimed to hear Sweet say he needed something to tie Latisha up with. Later that evening, Bell briefly went back to Johnny's home, but according to her, she didn't ask what happened to Frazier. "I didn't want to know," she told jurors. Johnny's attorney maintained his innocence and claimed his client had played no part in Latisha's fatal abuse. The trial did not include any evidence from medical examiners or the autopsy reports common to most fatal abuse trials, as Frazier's body was never found. Following a day of deliberation, on April 30th, 2013, a jury found then 19-year-old Johnny Sweet guilty of first-degree felony fatal abuse with aggravating circumstances, first-degree premeditated fatal abuse with aggravating circumstances, kidnapping, and tampering with physical evidence. He faced a mandatory minimum of 30 years and a maximum of 60 years of incarceration. Records indicated that Johnny Sweet is incarcerated at the United States Penitentiary, McCreary in Pine Knot, Kentucky. He will be eligible for release in 2057.
Maureen, as you can imagine, it is a relief for all involved, for the family, for the detectives for whom this has been going on for nearly 3 years now. The verdict, guilty on all counts. Johnny Sweet, seen here during police interrogation shortly after his arrest, was found guilty today of all charges in the August 2010 death of 18-year-old Latisha Frazier. And Frazier's family was relieved by today's verdict.
I'm happy. Our family's happy. God done came through for us, and we've been, Caroline been fighting. Us as a family been fighting.
Shortly after Latisha disappeared, the family passed out flyers looking for her right outside Johnny Sweet's apartment, where she had been beaten and murdered by Sweet and a group of young people. He admitted involvement in this January 27, 2011 police interrogation video, which the jurors saw.
I saw her stomping her out, and then when I saw her stomping her out, they pulled me away from her.
It did not take the jury long to find Sweet guilty.
We did what I think jurors are supposed to do.
Okay, you took your time.
We did.
Okay. You thought he got a fair trial?
Absolutely.
How did you feel when you heard the verdict?
Good. Real happy.
Feel like justice.
Justice had been served.
I'm happy. Like, that's what he deserved to get.
Yes.
Guilty.
Subsequent to his cooperation, Assistant U.S. Attorney Chris Kavanaugh stated that they wouldn't have been able to prosecute these cases without McCullough's help, and given his acceptance of responsibility, they asked the court to grant him probation. Antoine McCullough admitted to police that he helped dispose of Frazier's body, and following his guilty plea, he was sentenced to 2 years of probation for conspiracy to commit evidence tampering. Lenny Bell, a nursing student at Trinity University, was sentenced to 3 years on a kidnapping charge. Annika Nelson's sentencing information regarding her second-degree fatal abuse and kidnapping charges were not readily available. At his sentencing, Hassan apologized to Frazier's family and said if he could change the past, he would. He went on to say that it wasn't supposed to go down how it did, as he begged for forgiveness. "I really want you all to forgive me. I take full responsibility for my actions," said Hassan. Frazier's parents recalled her as a tomboyish girl who schooled her dad on the computer and joined neighborhood boys in sport games. Latisha's daughter, Diamond, is now in the care of her mother, Caroline Frazier. While the accused have all been sentenced, sadly, Latisha's body has never been found. May the family and friends of Latisha Frazier, known to family as Pooh, find solace in the happy memories, and I hope that one day her family can give her a proper burial. Thank you.